And I'll let you know that the meeting is being recorded.
Well, good.
Duly noted.
Yep,
Is that for George? Is he
In
not with us?
conformity with the law.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, George Ferrick was asking after it.
Okay.
So this is our quorum.
I guess so.
Oh, George isn't coming, huh? Ferrick.
No, he sent us some kind of an email that he wouldn't be able to make it for the next 2 times.
Oh,
So I bring you greetings from George Moret. Did you get my photo?
Got your photo? And
didn't
your,
look like him.
So he sends greetings. He would love to be invited sometime.
Oh,
And,
okay. Well, what the heck?
let's do that.
He said at our lunch, excuse me, he said at our lunch that he has had several hours of phone conversation with George Moretta, John Moretta, and with Mike Malloy. So he's begun to
And here
reconnect.
comes George Ferrick.
Also with George Ferrick, yeah.
George is with us.
Oh, hi, George.
Hey, George.
Hello, George.
What a shame.
Unmute yourself.
You mute, George.
Can you hear us, George?
Yes, I just unmuted myself.
There we
Okay.
go.
Now you
Got
are.
it.
Okay.
Good.
All right. So I was just saying that I had lunch with George Moret and he says hello.
Great.
Anything interesting happening in his life?
He goes to Mexico for about a month every year. He has retirement from the US Army and retirement from UPS, and he is quite comfortable financially.
Hmm.
And so he loves reconnecting and had lots of military connections and UPS connections, but up until this past year had lost track of seminary connections. So he just danced his way through Ted Howard's photo book. And so he's now lit up for seminary connections. He just celebrated his 80th birthday. I don't know if you're aware, but he is 1 year older than most of us because he was sick in the kindergarten or first grade and missed a grade.
Oh,
And so was always a bit older.
I
than
have
the
a
rest
vague
of us.
recollection.
That's why he had a driver's license. Did
Yeah, I
he
remember.
scare any of you with his wild antics?
Hmm.
Don't recall
Yes,
that.
yes, he did.
yeah, I remember going bowling with him. He had with some classmates. It seemed like we were up in the mountains or something.
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you recall
Yeah,
that?
he had his own car at age 15.
Mhm.
You mean when we were 15 or he was 15?
When he was 15.
Hmm.
Yeah,
That
he was
picture
an
of him-
entrepreneur. He had
Is he
paper
married?
route and lots
did he-
of other income sources.
Did he get married, John?
Far as I know, he danced that subject a little. I think he's had relationships, but no marriages.
Mm.
So for what I could gather, he was in Cabo San Lucas for the month with a girlfriend and many of his military friends fishing and hanging out and such.
Mhm.
The picture that he sent us did not remind me of George.
It didn't look like my memory of him either.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
I-
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
I thought it did in a sort of impressionistic way. You know, if once you knew it was George Moret, you could, the picture sort of suggested George.
Okay.
That's a good point. I saw it sort of that way too, when I first got together with him.
Mhm.
I'll have to take another look, yeah. You know, I'm going to have to absent myself a bit around 11 o'clock to fix a breakfast special for my granddaughter, 22 years old, who's staying here with us, and she's still in bed. She has a neck ache from being at the gym yesterday, but she likes the breakfast special, which I prepare.
Oh, good.
So,
What's your recipe?
Steak and eggs.
well, it's it's a little blue plastic. It's actually on some. It's actually like egg and cheese and greens, and on either bagel, a piece of bread, or Trader Joe's has something called Euro bread. It's kind of like the healthiest bread you could ever eat. It's very thin slice, made out of all kinds of healthy sunflower seeds and other stuff like that you probably wouldn't want to eat. But
Is she a vegetarian?
it's kind of like a Lenten bread, something that you eat for
Yeah.
penance.
As a sacrifice, huh?
Right.
Somebody should market something like that.
Yeah, they should. Yeah, I think I'll let them know. I think Trader Joe's would probably do that type of thing.
Yeah.
Bad tasting food, but nutritious for Lent.
And you get your penance done too at the same time.
Crack the Catholic market,
Anyway, yeah. So she just graduated from Marquette a year ago, and she took a course in feminist theology. They're all required to take theology courses at a Jesuit college, and she wants to go to law school. So she's studying for her LSATs. She majored in criminal justice and political science, and she's, very much taken up with women's rights and the new Jim Crow type thing. And she had an internship in Washington, D.C. Marquette has a mansion there. Somebody left them in a house or something, so students could go there for a semester and be an intern with a legislator.
Oh,
So she got hooked up with a woman, George, you may know her, or Ned. She's like 82 years old, and she's in the San Gabriel Valley area. She has gray hair. So she's the House of Representative.
Oh,
Yeah,
I
she's
don't-
like 82 years
No,
old. I
it
can't
doesn't-
remember her name.
Doesn't come to mind.
Anyway, so she had that experience. She went to Cuba to visit Cuba with her Spanish class. She was an intern for the mayor of Nashville, who was a friend of her father's, a buddy. So she's really into politics and stuff like that. So she's studying for her LSATs.
George,
She'd like to go to Georgetown if possible.
who did you say was in the House of Representatives from San Gabriel Valley?
You
I
did?
didn't have the name. It's a woman who's about 82 years old.
Oh,
She's kind of
82,
one of the
okay.
oldest members. Yeah, but so she found that very interesting being in Washington, D.C.
Mhm.
during her
Was
junior
she-
year, I think it was.
and some amazing times to be there.
Mhm.
That's right. Yeah.
Was she there when the Trumpians descended on the Capitol building?
No, she wasn't there. Yeah,
Oh. Did she come back with her? Does she think more of our system of government now or less after your experience?
Well, I think she's, I think she's kind of open-eyed about the whole thing. I asked her to, I had loaned her a book about Trump, and I said, could you bring that book back to me when you come? Because I wanted to read it. I really didn't have a chance to read it. It was about a book called something like The Magic of Trump, Magick. I think it sold about, I think it sold about 10 copies or 12, but it's interesting because it's written by a guy who used to be a musician and some famous musician. he's British, but it's based on the fact that the whole thing of magic is that you can go ahead and create, whoops. You can create reality just by repeating it over and over again, and it becomes true. It becomes your reality, regardless of whether it's not other people's reality, but that's what's happening. That's what Trump has been doing, repeating something over and over again until people accept it as true. And that's what this author meant by magic, a form of magic.
There's been a lot written recently, I think, about how ready much of the population was when Trump came along, that it didn't just all originate with him. It was building over time. Did you get a sense that's true?
Yeah, and it's interesting because being on the West Coast, Trump wasn't, he was kind of a distant figure, but I know he had that show The Apprentice, but apparently Trump had a huge following based on being back east. He had big billboards in New York, before he was running for president even. He had a big outsized kind of name and kind of glitzy awareness in the Trump Tower back there, and which being out here in the West, I didn't know about, but he had this huge following even before he even thought of running. And he did think of running back in the 90s, I think. Didn't you read somewhere that
Yeah.
he contemplated running earlier? And so it's something that's been planted in his mind, and his ego was fostered by his father and his grandfather. They had, there's a biography of Trump which brings the 3 generations into focus that really explains a lot about Trump.
Is that the one by his niece, George?
No, his niece doesn't bring in so much of the 3 generations. The niece one is very good in terms of family dynamics, of this generation. But this other book, if you want, I'll look it up and send you the name. But I got it from the library. It's written by a woman who wrote it actually in, I think, 2000. But reading it, you'll say, yeah, hey, that's the Trump of today. And that totally explains who he is, because it explains his father's way of being a business person, and his grandfather, who was an immigrant from Germany, came over and was very successful in setting up bordellos and all kinds of crazy
Money
businesses.
makers, eh?
Yeah, money makers, that's right. And then he started hotels to go along with them and so forth. But yeah, it's really a very revealing biography. And you say, yeah, that explains it all,
Yeah, it's jarring. Betty and I guess it's getting to be 3 years ago, took a train trip from the Bay Area ultimately to New York City, and via Chicago, and spent a few days in Chicago. And there's a Trump Tower in Chicago with his name emblazoned on it. And it's just, to me, it was just weird. I mean, it's tacky to me to just, like, oh, this is the Crook Tower, or something. And, and then again in New York City. And it bothers me. But that would bother me were he not president, just the tackiness of it,
Yeah, and out here, not too far from where I am, down that way, is the Trump National Golf Course.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know.
And that's going for, I don't know, 15 years at least. He bought, well, as was so often the case, he bought what I think it was just a vacant piece of property, and then decided to, wanted to make a golf course out of it. And when the golf course was nearing completion, there was a huge landslide in Palos Verdes, which wiped out about 2 of the links. And so the whole thing had to be some fill was needed, and then the whole thing had to be redesigned and rebuilt. But you drive past it on Palos Verdes Drive South, and it's It's a rather mammoth place, and of course, very, very glitzy, gilded. All the lettering is
Uh-huh.
gold, and you can't mistake that it's there.
Mhm. I knew an attorney who was involved in that and took Trump's deposition. And this attorney, it was a libertarian, now deceased, but he was telling me this, nobody was talking about Trump for president then, but he was telling me this guy, George, is a piece of shit. And Al Augustini, Ned, and, who just was a ferocious attorney and very hyper masculine affect, and how he and I became friends is one of the mysteries of the cosmos. But nevertheless,
he was your mentor, wasn't he?
Yin and yang.
Yeah. The first job I had, second job I had, first one I was a clerk for a federal judge, but I was in a firm, and this guy it was a big firm, and he just ate associates alive. And I ultimately said, I'm out of here. But I had the record for having lasted the longest with him. This guy reduced Bonifacio Garcia to tears, Dad. According to Herbert,
I would imagine.
Yeah, but he said Trump was just all show and glitz, and he took his deposition back in New York, and he said, and Trump, Al just exuded, I'm here to slit your throat. That's why I've come. And it'll be accomplished by lunchtime, probably, or certainly by the end of the day. And he just oozed menace somehow. And you never met him, Ned, right?
No, I've just heard many times from you.
he oozed menace and doom and litigation. And he said at some point, Trump, they were taking a break, and Trump was trying to make nice to him and showed him around the suite, and I like you. I could give you some work when this is over. And he said what just really got to him was he realized that in the wallpaper in the conference room, when you got close enough, the Trump signature appeared over and over and over and over in the wallpaper.
My God.
Wow. Jeez.
So anyway.
Yeah.
Was this a lawsuit against Trump or against his?
He was a party. I don't know what the issues were. Maybe people were trying to block the golf course, or sue him for the 2 holes that had fallen into the sea, or I don't know. Yeah. I have no idea.
The hotel, I think, Tom, is called Terranea, isn't it?
No, that's different. That's a different outfit.
Oh,
completely different. That's not owned by Trump. I don't know.
I
don't know that their business ethics are any better, but that gets in the news fairly frequently too. But it isn't Trump's.
Trump reminds me.
It wouldn't be called Terranea.
It would be called Trump Glitz.
Right.
I represented a billionaire once who I got him 2 or 3 spectacular results, really. Igor Linikov. I met him, and I was representing Unical in a case. And I happened to, after we settled the case, I happened to mention to his attorney that Igor had left like $20,000 on the table. In other words, I hadn't used all my authority. And Igor was so pissed. I mean, in an admiring way. He said, "Oh boy, I can't believe it. Nobody's ever done that to me. Would you like to represent me occasionally?" So, and at the end, the last case I did for him, he stiffed me for $35,000 in fees. And I'd won it, and I shouldn't have won it. And he was just that kind of guy. The way Trump would stiff contractors, architects, and
real estate
Unbelievable.
agents.
Yeah,
Mhm.
unbelievable.
Mhm.
The area around here in Brea, large area, is either begins with OLEN or ends with OLEN in honor of your rapacious dude.
Olenikov. He was
Yeah.
a brilliant man, Russian immigrant,
Yeah.
brilliant.
George, your story
Unical.
about him stiffing you, George Crook and Ned Shavira both knew my dad. And one of the memories
There was a cutthroat businessman.
yeah. What a gentleman. So there I was, maybe 17 or 18 years old, working in the office, and this Cadillac drives up to the front of the machine shop plant, and this guy gets out. My dad jumped out the door and got in this guy's face. He was probably a head taller than my dad, and my dad physically chased him off the property. I've never seen him like that before. And then dad came back and said, that son of a bitch stiffed us out of $2,000 last year, declared bankruptcy, and now the son of a bitch comes back in a Cadillac? No way. That was my dad.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Oh my.
We knew his dad, Tom and George. Very admirable guy, Mr. Grimmer.
Integrity.
Very good.
Yeah,
Integrity,
totally
that's-
solid. Yep.
It kind of filtered down to his son,
I
Yep.
hope.
of course. Oh, it did.
Quite well, I think. Yeah.
So anyway, so one more note about Trump. So anyway, my granddaughter brought the wrong book back to me. The book she brought is called After Trump, written by two attorneys or two people who had been in past administrations. So I'm going to read that. I think it's saying, because of what Trump did, here's about 3 dozen things that need to be done to the presidency and that weren't, that Trump took advantage of because nobody ever thought a president would do this, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm going to take a look at those things.
Mhm.
But if you want to move on for Trump, Tom, thank you for sending that video of Bishop Barron singing the Bobby
Oh,
Dylan
wasn't
song.
that
That was kind of
something?
fun, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
Great.
Yeah.
And then I went and watched the video of the priest. You'd sent a couple other attachments of two people. One was a priest in, I think, Illinois, who's you
Lifting
said the
weights.
CEO of,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, right, the
Yeah.
lifting weight guy. So that was very impressive, the article that went with that and the lifting weights, and yeah, that was very impressive.
And then, pretty recently, his Barron's brother, John, I think, has
Yeah.
become a part of a major part. I forget exactly what in the
I think
production.
president.
Yeah, maybe so.
Now,
He's got an interesting system around him.
yeah, he
Yeah, he
does.
does.
Does he see any problem with the name of his organization? With all the fires we have in California, where
Word
You know,
on
should
fire.
change it? World needing water. You should change it to something else, maybe.
Well, I don't know. It seems to be there's name recognition and it seems to be doing well. I don't
Yeah.
think you change what's successful,
Yeah.
but it's
Anyway, I was impressed with his harmonica playing at the same time that he's playing
Me
the
too.
guitar.
yeah,
That's not easy.
And he saved it toward the end.
right.
I didn't know what to think of that.
Well, yeah.
I guess he's really trying to be all things to all men, So is the
Yeah.
Win Allman.
Right, yeah.
He's
Well, that's a St. Paul thing, isn't it? Isn't that a
yeah.
St. Paul?
Yes, yes.
Right? Yeah,
And I am such a fan of Bishop Barron's, he's gotten heat recently from the Sons of Thunder that are, anti-Vatican II. And he said it in one of his things, he was just shocked at the tone and content of the emails. I mean, they sounded quite abusive and mean-spirited and hostile, just bad.
Well, he had
I could see.
He had a talk at the Religious Ed Conference in Anaheim, for the LA Archdiocese, and he was asked to speak about the culture of contempt. And it was about what was it, Tom? About 35, 40 minutes. And
this was this past year.
Yeah.
A few months ago.
And he used some of the less malicious names that he was called, and he said, and these are Catholics, these are my brother Catholics.
That's I can see a blockbuster movie, superhero, Sons of Thunder versus World of Fireites. Well,
There's a start, George. There's a start.
There will probably be a movie about his life one of these days, but it hasn't ended yet, and it would be a little premature right now, I think.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. How old is he? Is he 60 yet?
I don't think so.
You could probably Google it and see.
I'm doing that right now.
Is he in Wikipedia yet?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is he?
Heck, I'm in Wikipedia.
Are you? Okay.
Yeah, they think I was a Civil War general and an Indian
didn't you
fighter.
have an ancestor who was an Indian fighter after the Civil War?
And that I'm buried at Arlington. I don't know. No,
He's
there was
61.
He's 61, yeah.
Yeah, okay. There was the General George Crook, but he's no relation.
So
the Wikipedia article says that he was influenced by Thomas Aquinas, Augustine of Hippo, and John Henry Newman, among others.
Yeah.
Or J.R.R.
And Cardinal
Tolkien,
George, I think, wasn't it?
Cardinal George was acknowledged to be his
Francis
mentor. Hans Urs von Balthasar is also he's fluent in French, Spanish, German, and Latin.
One of the
guitar and harmonica.
Yeah.
One of the controversies that the far right started about him was his very mild reference to hoping that all people will be saved, and the far right jumped all over him. How can you possibly say that? And they turned it into a big cause celeb. And he got Hans Urs von Balthasar has quite a lot of writings about that. I will call all men to all people to myself, as Jesus said.
I used to subscribe to First Things, and I let my subscription lapse, and I haven't gone back to it. But they had an article or two on that topic with Richard John Newhouse, no less, expressing the same hope and quoting von Balthasar and Saint Irenaeus. for that proposition, and John Paul II.
It's
I mean,
in John Paul II.
Yeah, John Paul said something about, now I'm not saying this is our teaching, but gosh, wouldn't it be nice if all people could be saved?
Well, to my mind, a lot really depends on which imperfect model of salvation, basically, do you subscribe to? Do you subscribe to a reward and punishment model? If you do, then eternal damnation and a loving God punishing you to eternal damnation makes perfect sense.
Yep.
Because
got a lot of people in hell.
If you subscribe to the unconditional love of God being available to all, and it's up to us to receive it or reject it, well, is there a possibility of some kind of conversion, and what would be the conditions of that in however we could imagine whatever things are like after death? I think we have some revelation that has some certainty and has some ambiguity, but I've often felt that the only way I myself can justify hell is if I were of a frame of mind or a frame of heart that I would prefer myself to infinite love.
Yeah.
Now, a question I think does come up as all of our concepts about eternity nonetheless come from our own being bound to time.
Limits, yes.
Yeah. And we don't know what eternity is, really. We talk about eternal now or stuff like
So
that.
should I fix up her? Okay.
But we really, we really don't know, because everything that we can think of, all our conceptual framework is bound by time. So we sort of.
I'm going to take a little break here because I have to fix this breakfast thing for Maggie now. So I'll be back.
Okay, all right. And
Okay.
I'll be
Maybe
right
a little
back.
bit.
I've sometimes fantasized what would be the appropriate punishment. Well, I won't say punishment. I'll say atonement
Consequence.
for Hitler. What would enable Hitler to receive God's infinite love? And here is the thought that comes into my fantasy. And this is a self-imposed condition, that he could not receive God's love without seeking and receiving the forgiveness of every Jew and every other person that he put to death. And of course, many of them are absolutely not inclined to forgive, to bring about a reconciliation. But he would have to go and seek, and he'd have all eternity to do this, but he would go and have to seek, to make amends to each person whom he has offended, obviously very severely. He would have to make amends and reconciliation. So, you can't be reconciled to God without being reconciled to God's people.
The thought,
Is that, and doing that with 20 million people, is that a realistic expectation. I think it's what one could say, well, could he ever do that? No,
Well,
maybe not.
if you push that thought, that fantasy, as you say, and in order to be saved, we need to reach a certain level of perfection, which, in my mind, really is dying to yourself, which is part of forgiveness. You die to yourself and you embrace, your enemies.
Yeah.
Then that certainly would be something that has to be contemplated. I love the way you put that.
Yeah.
I've got some work being done in the back. I'll be right back.
There's well, wait till Ned gets back. There's I guess it's a novella or well, it appeared, I don't know. There's a book called The Sunflower by Simon Wiesenthal, I think, that sort of deals with this. Are either of you two guys familiar with it?
No, I'm a little bit familiar with Wiesenthal, but not that.
Yeah. Well, wait. I want to discourse on it, but I should wait for George and Ned because it's a very interesting story, and it touches on this. I remember the first time I met Herbert Naj. I tore into him because of theodicy and specifically the Holocaust. And how could God, a just God, et cetera, the eternal question. And Herbert, the way he finessed me was, he said, well, I certainly think all those people, the victims, the Jewish victims specifically, were owed an explanation. And so when they appeared before God's throne for the particular judgment, I would have thought it wouldn't have been out of line for God to have thought up an answer, an explanation for them, and to have been quite ready with it. That's what he said. I just thought that was brilliant. Because, of course, once they get in front of the throne of God, they're no longer thinking in earthly concepts, right? I mean, necessarily. Although we don't know, I guess.
And the first switch is no more dualistic thinking. Dualism does not exist in God.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Only trialism.
Okay.
Threefold
The love
thinking.
of the Trinity, the cyclical part. So, Tom, maybe Hitler's sentence would be 19,999,000 deaths to self.
Well, yeah.
Then purification follows.
Because for each individual, he would have to go through and go through his own, once again, conversion process, death to self process. And, it's hard telling. I've often thought that the reason why we have theology is simply to avoid not having anything to say.
Shit. Henry? Just try. Henry? What the hell?
Okay.
He's going to call back now. Okay, look, I just want to say I'm at a meeting. I would think I could.
Multitasking does not come easily as you get older, does it?
Yeah.
Especially when the ringer's
Henry?
on.
Okay. I'd hit the mute button. I'm in a Zoom conference. Can I call you back after some point after 12? Okay, I will. Bye. Thanks.
That sounds very impressive, George. You're in a Zoom conference. Yeah.
Well put, yes. I sat up very straight when you said that.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually, this Zoom has been a blessing, hasn't it?
You bet.
I can't imagine what would have happened had Zoom, and there's one or two others I know of that are comparable, I guess, not been up and running when this epidemic hit.
Yeah.
Civilization would have ground to a halt. I think. I mean, St. Charles Borromeo conducted the whole RCIA from start through the Mystagogia over Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
Bless their hearts. Good for them.
And it worked. It worked. The rookies, were faithful. They show up every week. Well, perhaps not every week, but right through the whole thing. And St. Charles started in, I think, June. They think RCIA should last a year.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine what would have happened to that program in that parish without Zoom or something akin to it.
Mm-hmm.
Government ran on Zoom. I mean, the guy calling me is Henry Tovmasian, who's he and I worked together, and he was going to report on a pre-trial conference that he had by Zoom. No, it's not by Zoom. It's by some Microsoft thing, Microsoft Teams. Same thing, with a judge and opposing counsel and Henry, and they sat there and went through issues, and we've tried cases over Zoom. It's amazing, and what would have happened without it?
Yeah, you just have to be rather careful about those little things that you can put up on the screen that make you look like a cat.
Oh,
remember that video?
Oh, that attorney. Yeah. Where was it? That was in Texas.
Yeah.
And not to mention Jeffrey Toobin of the New Yorker, who's written a lot of law-related books and was on some conference call and didn't, and there he was, sort of, he was masturbating and didn't realize Zoom was picking it up. Look at Tom's halo.
Yeah, see, these filters can be very nice.
that was so instantaneous too.
Yeah, I think I'll go back to the halo. There we go.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
Well, you look at there's a little icon that says stop. Let me get rid of this. Stop video. And there's a little up arrow caret next to it. And you can choose a video filter.
Oh, okay. Video, yeah, choose video filter. Okay.
And also choose a virtual background.
Okay.
Like here is the view of Redondo Beach from up in the mountains there.
Oh, that's cool. Is that a photo that you have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I took it on a nice clear day. Some time ago. Or I can, this is one of their stock ones, the Northern Lights. And also have the surf.
Oh yeah, this photo here.
Or
Gotcha.
Waikiki Beach.
I like the beach, yeah. That's cool.
Or this other one is actually Jesus healing, I think that's in the catacombs, healing the woman with a hemorrhage.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, there's quite an early picture of Jesus, right? Like, he's beardless.
He usually is in the catacombs.
Right.
Yeah. Whatever that may mean, I don't know, because Jews generally were bearded, but Romans weren't. So,
So probably our stock image of him is more accurate than the catacombs. I mean, however he looked, he probably had a beard.
yeah, and I'm not too sure that the catacomb artists were all that interested in ethnic and historical accuracy. I think, they were more interested in something that speaks to the people who are right there.
Well, here's a thought. Were there any rebel teenagers among the Jews who would not be bearded? Just like there are teenagers today who go against the grain?
Well, one
The
problem,
Romans certainly had plenty.
one problem with not being bearded would be, just imagine shaving yourself with a dull knife.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Practical considerations.
Yeah. I mean, the Romans, I guess, were pretty good about getting a good sharp blade on them, but I wonder if their pictures and their statues, they probably did not depict 5 o'clock shadow. So
they look so smoothly shaved, but they couldn't have been.
Yeah.
Or at least not by the end of the day.
Yeah. So.
Well, let me bring up a couple things. One is I have a draft email to Fred Lawrence, which I'm going to send off, inviting him to be a guest. And I think you all concur.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Concur in that. So he may be, I'm not sure if he's busy. He and Sue would host a major Lonergan conference every June, as soon as the school term ended. Usually it was mid-June, and I'm not sure if they're doing it online or virtual. If so, Fred may not have any time available until after mid-June, but I'll send him a note and I'll copy all of you on it. How's that?
Great.
Great.
And then here's another thought I had of a guest in light of, John, you're talking to Mike Malloy, his book of world religions and so forth. But Mike's saying that he doesn't have the time available. Yeah, you remember Joe DeMassa?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, Joe was in Fred's class, and Joe went on to, I think, resign from the priesthood, and he ended up being a religion professor at Pasadena City College, and he taught world religions there. And I speak to Joe periodically. He's in Pasadena, and he was kind of envious that we had this little group here. And I could see if he wanted to come and be a guest. He's quite an interesting person and a very, close to us.
I would certainly encourage that. I'd say yes.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
George, is he still married to the?
Yes, he's married to Maria DeMassa, and she was also a teacher at PCC, but a very successful real estate agent who helped us buy a couple houses, condos early on. And he and Maria went to All Saints Episcopal Church, where George Regas was a progressive rector there. And they run the vestry and very much involved and all that. So they're still married. They sold their house and moved into a condo in downtown Pasadena, that would have little upkeep, one of these condos that has a place you can get coffee. It has a little movie theater. It has a workout place, one of these kind of communities that has everything.
Yeah.
So, so I saw him about a year and a half ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Mrs. DeMassa, I believe, was an IHM.
I think she was, yeah, she was some kind of a sister, I think. Yeah. I'm not sure if she was an IHM or not.
but she
But
taught my
something.
ex-wife,
Oh, she did?
Rachel, yeah, at Queen of Angels High School. It used to be attached to the Placita. It was a, smallish Catholic girls' high school.
Mhm.
Que vole, Ned?
Talking about Joe DeMassa and his wife.
Oh yeah, the sister, his cousin actually.
Joe's cousin is his wife?
Yeah, she was an IHM nun, and well, maybe I'm completely
No,
off
she
here.
was. She was. She taught Rachel.
Yeah,
at-
you guys have
at
okay.
Queen of
She was
Angels
a
High School.
great. That was a great pairing.
Yeah. Yeah.
They were great entrepreneurs, and I remember they both taught at no, not both, but yeah, both taught at Pasadena
you-
City College. I thought I
Right.
heard you talk, George,
Right.
and
Uh-huh.
Joe told me, he said, and we decided that why can't we be, I mean, we can be very good Christians doing teaching and helping people and be poor, or we can go into real estate and get rich and still be good Christians helping people. So we decided to get rich.
No, they did both. No, they did both.
They were
Yeah, they did
extremely
both.
successful at real estate. Yeah.
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 Right. Yeah. Maria was very good. Joe didn't sell real estate, but and they bought a property up in the hills above Pasadena, and every year they had a very successful summer camp for kids.
Wow.
Where parents need to put their kids someplace because they still have to work during the summer,
Mhm.
and so that was very successful. And their
Wow.
son, John Carlo, is the head of the emergency room at Holy Cross Hospital
Wow.
out near the seminary. And Cara DeMassa is, she used to work for the LA Times, and she's kind of running the summer camp type thing.
She
Yeah.
was a journalist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Talk about
Have you been in touch with Joe, Ned?
not
or-
not any time recently. The last
Yeah.
time I saw him was at a dinner that. Do you remember Bob Tritz?
I
Yeah.
remember his name. Yeah.
He was just played basketball like crazy. A scholarship at San Diego U basketball. He and Lou Del Castillo, I believe, came into
They did. They did.
at the same time, and Bob invited Joe and his wife to dinner, and us, and we had a great time. That's when he said, we decided to get rich and still be good Christians. And I remember at the seminary, you could not find anybody more optimistic, go-getter, 110% in whatever it was that he was doing, studying, playing ball, you name it. He was just this motivated, go get 'em kind of guy.
It's the way I remember him. Yeah.
Yeah, I really remember his.
So Ned,
Ned, did you pick up that we voted that George Farrick's going to extend a Zoom invitation for them to join us at some point?
I didn't, but that sounds like a wonderful idea. Wonderful.
As well as Fred Lawrence and spouse.
That's as good, at least as good an idea.
Yeah. That sounds great.
Yeah, we could ask Fred Lawrence to tell us who Habermas is
Yeah,
in plain language.
yeah. I tried to read a book, and it took me a little bit.
Yeah.
I was going to tell this story, but I was waiting for Ned and George to come back. But the context was this: we were talking about, is it possible even that all could be saved? And that was the topic that Bishop Barron raised that attracted a lot of online abuse. And then Tom started talking about it. Let's see, under the divine justice theory, it's perfectly fair, I guess, that people could go to hell. But what was the other possible theory, Tom?
Well, if you emphasize the how would I say, the nature of God as being self-outpouring love, then whatever your own personal shall we say fate or eternal fate would be entirely your own choice. Mm-hmm. Or to put it another way, if I want myself, I don't want unconditional love, so I'm going to separate myself from that. Now, the question then, and that would be hell. The question then is, in eternity, could I change my mind? But that sort of begs the question, what exactly is eternity? Because our own concept, even our own concept of eternity, is one of temporal duration that goes on forever. But that means eternity is not bound by time. Time is a measure of change. Once we step out of the physical reality of this world, shall we say, time becomes meaningless because it's no longer, we don't have the stuff to change that time depends on. So we don't know. Yeah, that's my main point. We just don't know. We can bring about theories even based on what we hold, and I hold too, as unchangeable revelation, but those can only go so far, and the ultimate reality beyond that is we just don't know.
Yeah, whatever we do, whatever we think, whatever human beings do, we're all, as John said, we're limited. We're so finite. Mm-hmm. How can we? There's a theory that's a corollary of this, that prayer is timeless, and a lot of that kind of conceptual paradigm is also used with respect to Mary and her Immaculate Conception. When did she get redeemed by God? Well, it's timeless, and therefore she was born immaculate, and then she had Jesus, and there's no problem because mm-hmm. of that conceptual paradigm. Isn't it wonderful to think that there could be salvation for all? And I particularly like this devotion that's spreading very quickly about that Saint Faustina, mm-hmm. is that her name? Mm-hmm. has brought to us, and this wonderful image of Jesus standing there with rays coming out of his heart to signify his boundless, limitless love and mercy, undiluted by any limitation. Uh-huh. And it's just
here's one of the questions, I think, though, about universal salvation. Would you consent to spending all eternity with Donald Trump?
No, he would be in another part of heaven. That's where the scoundrels.
A separate tower.
They're saved. Yeah.
I've always kind of imagined judgment as being, I'm being welcomed into God's throne room. And God is up there saying, Tom, it's so good to see you. Come up and sit next to my friend here. And as I'm drawing closer, I see that that friend sitting next to God, that God wants me to sit next to, is the person that I absolutely could not stand in my whole life.
Yeah, but maybe he'd be so transformed that you would say,
Exactly.
Donald,
Well,
you saw the light.
And
no,
you would
I
be
don't know.
transformed.
It might be, the question is, do you see the light?
Well,
Well, you
Well,
by
both of
yeah,
you,
if you're that
both
close
of
to
you
God,
would be
you
there as redeemed people.
Yeah,
And,
we would
and
be
I'm,
there as redeemed people. And is it
so
enough
does universe.
to accept that I am redeemed and trust God that Donnie is okay?
Well,
take,
well,
take
you know,
one
does
step
universal,
further and say, will we put a limit on God's ability to seduce Donald Trump and to seduce Hitler over time?
That's an interesting thought.
like,
I
like the
remember,
prophet.
look, I remember a conversation I had with Herbert on this. I was driving him home down the 405. And I said, well, Herbert, can Hitler have been saved? And Herbert said, no, I don't think so. But, maybe, but I doubt it. But, and I said, well, but he was a brutalized child. His father used to beat him within an inch of his life, supposedly. And that's going to warp you and make you into a monster. And so, is it not possible that God could, when Hitler, bit into the cyanide, that the next thing he knew, God was saying, "Oh, Adolf, let me wipe the tears from your eyes. And you don't have to be that way anymore." And Herbert said, he said, George, that's very poetic. That's very beautiful. But I don't think so. Herbert was not fond of Hitler, but there's a book. There is a novella. I'm not sure what it is, by Simon Wiesenthal called "The Sunflower." And nobody had read this. George, have you read it?
no,
Okay. Well, the
sunflower.
So you can say anything about it.
Okay, well, the conceit of the story is this. Wiesenthal is in a work detail, slave labor during the war, and this nurse, they're outside some building, he and his colleagues and fellow slaves, and this nurse comes down and says, who's Jewish? And Wiesenthal says, well, I am, And the nurse says, well, come with me. So he goes inside and upstairs and to a hospital room. And lying there is an SS officer of some prominence. I don't know, at least a colonel, I guess. And Wiesenthal, he comes in, he says, the SS guy says, are you a Jew? And he says, yes. And he says, well, let me tell you, I need your forgiveness. And let me tell you what I've done. And he starts telling the Wiesenthal about the atrocities he's committed. And I don't remember if it was a whole bunch or if it was one in particular. But either way, one of them, or the one, was that he had been instrumental, I think, in herding a bunch of people into a building, wood building, perhaps a synagogue, and then burning it, and incinerating the ball, which the ISIS group did a lot. And so he tells him the story. It says, will you forgive me for all the Jews I've killed? And, I'm going to die and I know I did wrong, and, et cetera. And Wiesenthal turns on his heel and walks out without saying a word. And that's the story.
Mhm.
And then in the book I had, there's a symposium conducted of a rabbi, a priest, and I don't remember who the third participant was, maybe a minister, maybe Wiesenthal himself, I don't remember. And the topic is, did he do the right thing, morally, by walking out? And the priest is saying, well, of course not. We're supposed to forgive people, et cetera, et cetera. And the Jewish answer is, of course he did the right thing. He can't forgive the guy for anything other than wrongs the guy did to him. He can't forgive him for wrongs to other people. And that's the story, but it was it was a lot circulated, I guess, maybe in the early 70s, I don't know. But so that sort of, Tom had conducted this hypothetical that maybe if there is salvation possible for Hitler, God would say to him, okay, Adolf, you got to go out to all 6 million Jews, not to mention all the other innocents you killed, and ask each of them to forgive you. And when you finish that, come back and we'll talk,
Yeah.
So does universal salvation raise the stock in the doctrine of purgatory?
I guess.
Doesn't it make purgatory more plausible?
I guess it
Well,
does.
And maybe that's an example of it, yeah.
By that way of looking at it, basically it makes hell temporary.
Yeah.
So it turns hell into
Yeah.
purgatory.
Into purgatory.
Right.
But
Yeah.
the bottom line is we don't know.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
I didn't use.
We can speculate a lot, but God is as much beyond us as the ocean out there, which
Right.
I can see from my window. I can't see Russia, but I can see the ocean or China. Now there's still a drop of coffee left in my cup here, and
And you want more than a drop?
well, no, the drop of coffee is kind of represents the way that all of us collectively are able to look at things. The ocean is what reality really is.
I didn't believe
Remember
in hell.
the St. Augustine thing with a little
Yes.
beach.
Yeah,
It
I
could
didn't
be.
believe in hell for a long time, even after I had my conversion, because how could a good God, a merciful God, do that to people? Now I do believe in it. I think hell is the ultimate validation of the stature of human beings. We have enough stature to really fuck it up.
Yeah.
That's the way I've come to look at it. No, I don't know.
Or maybe you could say it's the ultimate validation of free will.
Yeah. Well, free will is a stretch.
Well, that's where it gets complicated, isn't it? I mean, when we talk about the little less than the angels who we are, in what condition does that put us a little less than the angels? That's all the ideal, it seems to me. But we've got so many qualities or I don't know what to call them, facets to each person: emotional, intellectual, social, just huge complex of realities within us, some of which are very developed, others of which are little minute things. How can we possibly get to the level of realizing the immensity of our rejection of God, of perfect goodness. How do we can't even understand perfect goodness. The only thing that keeps me where I am, and that's firmly in Catholic Christianity, is looking at the crucifix. Other than that, it makes no sense to me. And so that complex within us is a mystery and a stumbling block to me.
I'll be back in 1 minute.
Psalm 8, according to the NIV, which I just, as it says of God, you have made man a little lower than the angels, but that's God's original intent, perhaps. Maybe that's Adam's generation and whatever that means, but he created us a little less than the angels. Doesn't mean we still are.
Yeah. Yeah, John Henry Newman, one of the few things I remember about him when I was writing my thesis is he said, because there is a God, there has to be this primordial catastrophe that we have been calling original sin, but what we could denominate in some other way. He said, but that is an absolute reality if God exists.
Well, why?
Because how could a good God have done what we've done to ourselves? And that's my primary way of explaining what Tom was saying. We either choose ourselves or we lose ourselves and find God. And we do that. God doesn't punish us. He's constantly offering his love and forgiveness. And we either accept or we're caught in the black hole of our ego.
That's well put, Ned, I think.
Yeah. Chesterton said original sin is the one Christian dogma that is, I forget exactly how he said it, but perfectly obvious. I mean, obviously true, just look around and you see the truth of the original sin. But how do we get it from generation to generation? I mean, here's that original sin, and as a result, snakes gotta eat dust, and we gotta work and die, and women gotta have difficulties in childbirth, and on and on and on and on through all time. What's that about?
Well, and then corollary to that, you have the fact that lions have to eat gazelles in order to survive. And the lion and the lamb, they say, can lie down together in the perfect eternal kingdom, but the lamb's not going to get much sleep. And the lion is going to starve to death.
Yeah.
And we see all of these other
No. The bear will eat hay, right? Like the ox. So might the lion.
So might the lion. That is true, but it would be a fundamental rearrangement of
elementary reality.
Yeah. Of course, now when you said the bear eating hay, it immediately called to mind within the next month, we're going to start seeing on TV on the computer, basically, these marvelous pictures from the Katmai Falls National Park in Alaska of the bears at the top of the falls devouring the salmon as they are jumping up. It's you see pictures of that, still pictures, and you wonder, wow, how did they ever get this? Well, they got it because there's a visitors platform there with 24-hour cameras showing half a dozen bears standing at that falls, just catching these salmon as it virtually jump into their mouths.
George was talking a little bit ago about his daughter's dog. Remember that, George?
Yeah.
His name is Buster, and he's a doodle, some kind of doodle.
Combo of a poodle and a Labrador, not
Labradoodle.
Labradoodle?
Anyway, it doesn't matter what he is. He's this nice, large, I love that dog. And some poor bird, George?
squirrel.
Squirrel, that's right. Happened to be in just the wrong place relative to Buster. And Buster jumps out and grabs him and kills him. And from that point on, or at least very frequently, he sits there in that same spot, ready to spring, and he's constantly looking back and forth.
Not a muscle moving, like some real predator.
Wanting to kill whatever gets in his way. Yeah, it's a savage time.
Well, like they say, you can trust your dog with your life, but don't trust him with your sandwich.
Let me get some coffee.
Very early in our conversation, somebody mentioned Trump seemingly came from out of nowhere, and who would have thought pre-Trump that there could ever be a turn like this in our national life? He does have a precursor, and that's Sarah Palin. Sarah Palin was the vice presidential nominee for the Republicans in the 2008 election.
Right.
And she's a pretty good John the Baptist to Donald's Jesus, don't you think? I mean, she was a complete ignoramus, proud of it. What's the guy's name? Steve Schmidt, who was in McCain's campaign and was in charge of briefing her on issues, has written that she was just impossible. She had no interest in it. She saw no need for it.
Yeah.
You just, all this is infused knowledge or something, or, her opinion was just as good as Henry Kissinger's as far as she was concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, at least in that aspect, she certainly did not have the entrepreneurial skill, nor perhaps the moral deviousness, I don't know, of Donald Trump.
Nor the support system already established on the East Coast.
That,
yeah.
But in all that you're saying, I think you're very right. That and how could McCain, an otherwise honorable and intelligent person, have selected her?
I've wondered. He was impulsive as a person, for one thing. And somebody from the National Review they took one of those National Review cruises up to Alaska, and she came on board and wowed all those conservatives,
So it could be that it was a committee that wanted her and then proposed it to McCain, who then...
I suspect that was more the case.
Well, supposedly he knew his campaign was in trouble, and he thought this was, the Hail Mary pass that just might work.
Yeah.
I mean, she got much bigger crowds that he drew.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
You never knew what was going to come out of her mouth. That is one of the reasons I think that she did.
So they got people prepared. Yeah, that's like what you're saying, George. He was like the John the Baptist. Yeah,
Yeah, well,
She,
you're right.
I mean, what an ignoramus she is. But so is Trump, you know.
well, and then, but one little bit of good came out of it, that I think Tina Fey owes her career to her.
Yes.
What a great job. Oh, my goodness.
Oh, it's magnificent. Yeah. But who would have thought, I mean, watching Sarah Palin, that half the country was saying, that's my kind of politician.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Well, I guess it just tells us about the population of America
Yes,
too, and
exactly.
about
Yeah.
that Sarah Palin is not alone, nor is Trump alone, but there's a lot of people who reverberate to both of those types.
Interesting you say that. I'm going to hold up. I just picked up this book. It's called The Age of Entitlement, America Since the 60s by Christopher Caldwell.
Oh,
Mhm.
And I think we five are uniquely positioned because we sort of came of age, didn't we, in the 60s?
Yeah, we did.
And our awareness. So I just picked it up. Chapter 1 is 1963, the assassination of Kennedy. But I'm hooked already. That's
good.
my, yeah.
that's where it all went bad, but when they shot Jack. I mean, don't you think that I often think of JFK's funeral as the zenith of the American empire? It just the American sun began to set as of that day.
Mhm.
We didn't know it, but
Mhm. Yeah.
Vietnam was down the road, and that did us great harm, or we did ourselves great harm.
Yeah, right.
I've often wondered too, just following up on that, George, whether when Johnson succeeded him and got his Great Society or rolling, his fantastic relationships with Congress, which got all of these, almost like Biden, all these programs to bring the poor in, pouring money out. I remember getting a job from that money during the summer before I got married, and I don't know whether that did more bad than good. It spawned these crazy right-wing people, the contract with America, etc.
Well, it didn't work. The Republicans will say, "Oh, war on poverty, that was bullshit. Look how that flopped." Well, they only really tried it for about 2 years, because of the war.
Yeah.
It wasn't a real attempt, I don't think. I don't know. Monsignor English in Pomona was big on supporting the war on poverty, right, George?
I really don't know. Yeah, I don't.
Can you imagine?
Are you being kind of ironic?
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you this.
I bet he couldn't care less.
No, here's one of the things. Yeah, for Lent, when I was there, he invited me to go with him in a limousine all the way into Los Angeles to the farmers market out at Fairfax in Wilshire to buy cracked crab for our Friday dinner. That was our Lenten penance.
Lent.
Yeah, never forget that. So I guess that says it all.
It
Yeah.
kind of says a lot, for sure.
It
Yeah,
does.
Frank
It does, yeah,
Frank
doesn't it?
Osborne at Our Lady of Grace in Encino, basically every Friday had lobster. That was his
Okay.
penance.
Yeah.
Tom, were you ever with a pastor who was not an alcoholic? I guess Kiefer
Yeah.
wasn't.
Jerry Schmidt wasn't, but he was a workaholic. And I mean a classic workaholic, where he could not have an idle moment.
I didn't know there were any of those in the priesthood.
Yeah,
Back to Sandoval and all the spoiled, lazy priests that
right.
he spoke of, huh?
No, Jerry was very admirable because he had a real heart. He had no. He couldn't identify with Black culture, but he had a real heart for the Black people, and was really totally giving himself, even though the people themselves had kind of a mixed relationship with him, because he could be, very domineering and it's my way, but not in a materialistic sense. Let's see, who else wasn't an alcoholic?
I think
Has to,
when I went
to
to
really reach.
Fred Callahan was.
Yeah, no, there was some. Yeah, I think I can't remember his name. When I went to St. Ignatius in Highland Park, there was a very old, well-revered Irish Monsignor, which I can't remember his name, but he was considered like a saint, very pious, kind of like along the John Paul II type. And I don't think he was an alcoholic. And Sean Acton came in after, and I don't think he was.
Well, there was the pastor who was what was the Assumption Church of the Assumption in East Los Angeles.
Fosselman.
Wonderful man, Fosselman.
He was kind of a pendejo, Ned.
Well, he was a pendejo. He was a wonderful guy, though. He loved his people,
but was useless.
Well,
is he part of the Fosselman ice cream family in
yes.
Alhambra? That had Fosselman's ice cream. Yeah.
He was.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
I don't know how I knew. I Fosselman was a very holy man. I agree with Ned.
Yeah.
But when the Chicano movement started, I remember some guy, and I can't remember who he was, that addressed the East LA Deanery and had said that the devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe wasn't really helping the high school dropouts much or something like that, and told me that Fosselman was just outraged that he would say such a thing, that he would attack Our Lady of Guadalupe. So holy man, yes. I mean, he couldn't reason his way out of a paper bag, though, apparently.
I remember one.
By the way, Ned, let me say, Fosselman was very kind to me. I knew him personally, and he was very kind. And when Rachel and I got married in that church, he knelt in the sanctuary in his surplice for the whole ceremony. I mean, I liked him personally, but he just wasn't what was happening now.
He was completely dominated by headquarters. I remember the summer of our junior year, I think it was, our third year in theology, I went to him and asked him if we could put together a program for the summer for the parish that would include about 20 seminarians, 25 seminarians that I had recruited that would live wherever we could find, and he and I worked out where we, hall, partly in the rectory, so that we would take a census of the parish. We would put on sporting programs. We would put on scripture courses, etc. And he was all in favor of it. And then Hawks heard about it. And then I got a call from Father Fosselman, and he said, Monsignor, he said, sorry, that's over. We can't do that. And I begged him to tell me why, and he finally said, well, Monsignor, Hawks found out about it, gave me a call, and said that was a completely inappropriate thing to do with seminarians. And then John Hargendigge picked up the torch and invited us all to Sanger, and we had a wonderful, wonderful summer with all these guys. Just everybody remembers that. But yeah, he was a very obedient man, very prayerful man. I'm not sure he was that mindless, but he sure welcomed the idea of this thing. If he hadn't had some asshole with his axe,
Well, I'm glad to hear that. My picture of him was, because I taught at Salesian, Tom, which was, very much in East LA. And so I got very involved very much in East LA. And that's how I got to know Father Fosselman so well. And I saw him as, an old-time loyal priest of the McIntyre era, kind of like Kiefer would have been at St. Charles.
Right.
Only more so.
Kiefer was a good guy, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, very, very nice gentleman. Had his heart in the right place. The one thing that disturbed me a bit was he was, he had been the principal of where was it, out in San Gabriel Valley?
Amat.
Amat, yeah. He didn't really seem to have a lot of concern about the spirituality of the graduates of Amat, but he was so very proud of those who made a lot of money.
And not to mention their great football teams.
Yeah, I was at St. Christopher's for 4 or 5 months, and he was in residence there. Pastor was Father Bramble, of whom I've said a few things, during our conversations here, and academics and success in the world were his watchwords.
Yeah.
And other than that, you're right, Tom, I think.
Yeah.
I liked him. He was a mild man, cooperative, collaborative. Seemed anyway to me. And I was absolutely nobody in that rectory. But the first deacon that had said, no, I'm not going to get, I'm not going to accept the call to ordination just yet. Who do you think you are? Said. Anyway, I'm glad I did that.
Did anybody? George sent us a op-ed from the New York Times, right? Did anybody get to read that?
I didn't. I got it.
I read it yesterday, and
Yeah, I did.
yeah. what did you think?
I'm not sure what adjectives to use. I can, in a lot of ways, I can identify with her position. Although I'd love to see a little bit more nuance and a little bit more understanding of the principles behind which, where the church is coming from. But what did you think?
I sort of need to read it again, but I have known various women over the decades who just automatically say the Catholic Church is trying to control my body. And I always say, you know what? The Catholic Church doesn't give a fuck about your body. They're not trying to control your body. They think abortion is killing a human being, and they don't think people should kill human beings. And that's the way the Catholic Church understands the issue. It's not about, you're going to take some bodily liberty that you're not entitled to. It's rather that you're going to kill a person, and you shouldn't do that. I don't see how they make that mistake. How they get in. And George White, she had endometriosis, right? I mean, she eventually, the lady in this article, who has a degree in divinity, and I looked her up from Yale Divinity School, and so she's no fool. I just, after I'd finished the article, I said, well, wait a minute. Where's the Catholic Church in her decision to have a hysterectomy, which the church surely would have approved of if it, was asked? How is the church trying to control her body? I got to go back and read it, because I didn't see it.
I didn't. It's not in my awareness, and maybe I'm out of touch, that getting a hysterectomy is a sin. I don't get that. I never had that in my catalog of sins, that's a sin.
I'll tell you a fun little illustration that goes back into the early 70s. My wife, Kathy, had 3 beautiful children, but had 2 spontaneous miscarriages. And so, we discerned those miscarriages from our point of view. We didn't name them or baptize them or celebrate them as persons. So here comes Kathy, having had 3 children. She's pregnant with the 4th, and she's had cysts on her ovarian tubes. And the doctor, a Catholic, has recommended she have her tubes tied or a hysterectomy at the same time she gives birth to the 4th child. Well, St. John's Hospital would not accept any of that as a Catholic hospital. So we had to shift over to, Santa Monica Hospital, because they would not accept that 4 children was enough, and either tying tubes or hysterectomy would protect the life of the mother.
Wow.
Yeah, to me, that's way out of bounds.
Ridiculous.
Yeah,
Absurd.
that's really interfering.
A hysterectomy, I mean, you mean if you've got a bad womb, you got to keep it? I mean,
that was the challenge, right?
Necessary physically
in that article.
Disease.
But
if it's necessary, like if you have a cancer, or some physical disease that can be cured only by removal of it, you can do that because the quote birth control aspect of that is a
It's
secondary.
secondary. Yeah.
Ah. And wouldn't these cysts be potentially dangerous? And therefore, an intervention would be appropriate as they, proposed?
That's what our Catholic doctor suggested strongly to us. And with 3 children already in the household, are we going to look after her future health? Hell yes.
Yeah, right. Having
Well, I
a
know-
hysterectomy is not taking a life. That's totally different from abortion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it is
Well,
birth
it's-
control, and that is
It
that
But
where
wait, John, would your moral position have been, analytically speaking, any different if you'd had 0 children? In other words, she has cysts on her ovaries, Kathy did, or whatever it was.
Yep.
That's a medical problem. And here's how you fix that medical problem. Couldn't you do
That's right.
that even if you'd had no children?
Yeah, I think the
I say yes,
control thing-
George, but the argument we had with the hospital was, look at the children. We've got more than just Kathy's
Yeah.
health here. We've got the
Right.
rest of the family. And this is
Yeah.
not a birth control. It should not be seen as a birth control issue.
Right.
Well, even if it were a birth control issue, that's where I support you, John, in your decision. I think you have a right as a Catholic to say, I think this is a family that God wants us to have.
Yes.
And that's it,
Mhm.
and that you have a right to have a hysterectomy or a vasectomy or whatever. I support you 100%. And I just, I wrote a letter to the LA Times stating that in 1975 or 76, after Bishop Ward had some article about the church and contraception. And I wrote a letter to the editor saying that I believe a Catholic or a Christian can make that type of decision when he's standing before God to answer for his family. It's not the Pope that has to give the answer to the bishop. It's you and your wife saying, yeah, this is a family that we thought we should have.
Did they publish it?
Yeah, they did. And I'm trying to get a hold of it. I wish I would have kept it. Yeah.
I'd love to see that.
I bet it's out there somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I think I'm going to try to get a hold of it, but
Later today, I'm going to meet with the deacon at St. John Newman Parish. They've asked me to come back and get involved in some faith formation work.
Well, that's a good thing for them.
Well, I consider it so, and they want me to take over the library reopening and a Bible study. And I'll see how I go forward. Tom Welbers, I bring this up because at the time I left St. John Newman Parish, I had suggested to the pastor that in hearing confessions, why don't you consider as penance, send people to our library to check out a book or a DVD or some material as part of your spiritual growth.
that's perfect. Yeah.
Sounds great.
I'm going to reinstall
Great idea, John.
that suggestion. Tom, put it in your court. Did you discern there were other types of penance besides Hail Marys, Our Fathers, etc.?
Oh, always, always.
Well, there's the
The other
discipline.
thing that I would sometimes do is ask the person themselves, what would be a good penance? It could be a remedy to what you are turning away from.
Uh-huh.
And usually they would suggest something that was, far beyond what I would have imposed.
John, on top of that, when I was in the Immaculate Heart Parish in Hollywood. And I don't know if I created this earlier, but I had a photo album with articles in there, like say a couple dozen different written items. And I'd say, for your penance, you'll find a binder or photo album out in the pew there. Please read number 17. You know, I had different items and I would give them something to read out
And
there in
then
the photo
reflect
albums.
on, that's great.
Exactly, yeah, yeah, you know, articles about prayer or one thing or another. I don't know if I have the contents of that, but I had two of those I created. It had some photos in it and pictures, and then about 24 different selections from different authors and so forth that I would have them read instead of the 10 Hail Marys.
I'm
Kinda
going to
similar
tell
to
your
a-
story this afternoon.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey,
Yeah.
George, George, I
Yeah.
have a question. When you were thinking about whether you should leave the active priesthood,
Right.
did you have somebody older than you as a confidant, you know, like a spiritual director, somebody with whom you were struggling, that is the commies would have said, Brian Drollet would have said, with whom you were struggling that out?
No, I didn't have one confidant such as you've described, Gene O'Toole or Herbert Ryan.
Herbert, or, yeah.
Right. I was part of a Jesus Caritas group. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Uh, and in the group was George Niederauer and
Huh?
and also Mike Wimpy.
Oh,
as
well.
well as-
Wow.
yes,
What a contrast.
two extremes, yeah. As well as Jerry Thompson, Mike Robert, Tony Lohr, and a few others.
Pat
It was a
Thompson?
great group. No, Jerry Thompson.
Oh,
Jerry Thompson, I don't know if you know him, but anyway.
no, no.
So I didn't have, but who I did go to was Larry Shelburne, who had left. In other words, I didn't go to somebody that would say, George, I think you should pray more and deal with it, you know.
You knew Shelburne in Rome too, did you not?
I did, yeah. He was 1 year ahead of me, and so he helped me move it out of the rectory. As a matter of fact, I talked to him and heard his story, and then there was Peter Beeman. Do any of you know Peter Beeman?
Yes.
Mhm.
Peter Beeman.
Knew
Yeah,
him.
he was
I
quite a
know.
wonderful priest. He was very active in the Jesus Caritas thing there, and so he had left before, so I conferred with him. So I guess I was kind of checking out the waters and finding out how their experience was. And I went to a psychologist. I don't know if I told you this, but the county had some funds and they would fund a psychologist to meet with clergy in different neighborhoods, saying, well, let's help the clergy because they help people, you know, with counseling and problems that come up. So let's help them out by having a psychologist meet with them on a monthly basis. So when I was in Highland Park, I was in a group with Episcopal, Methodist, half dozen other Assembly of God, different ministers with Nito Orlando, who was a psychologist, a USC graduate. And so when I was going through my process, I called her up. So I went to counseling with her, you know, kind of started seeing her to kind of work out my decision. So that's, but I didn't have any spiritual director, any one person.
The reason I ask is I just have sort of a time machine notion of what you had to go through. And I hate the thought of seeing you going through it alone, you know?
Yeah, I didn't go through it alone. Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I imagine it was just a horrible journey, you know.
It was, yeah, a very gut wrenching journey. Yeah. I did a little, you know, I had this, as I went through it, I saw, you know, how faith is going into the unknown, a leap of faith. So I saw I could take a leap of faith by saying, okay, I'm going to continue, you know, the problems I have with the priesthood and the things I don't agree with and living a single life, etc., I could take that leap and say, George, I want to go into that area. Or I could say, George, I'm going to take a leap into leaving this whole thing that I prepared for 12 years in the seminary and 8 years in it, and go into this other dimension of going into the lay life, married life, etc. And I was taking a shower and I had this like moment of where God said, George, you choose. It's like a fortune cookie. You open it up and there's a piece of paper, and God said, George, you write on it what you choose to do, and I'm with you. That's the sense I had, that I could, and so.
I don't think that kind of experience comes without a prayer life, a spirituality that's based on prayer. My opinion.
Anyway,
George, had you already been able to secure your prerequisites for the license for the MFT?
I hadn't, I was halfway through those. I started those in, say, 1975. So I was using my day off to go to classes, and I was, and it goes way back to when I was in Pomona. When I was in Pomona, the Claremont colleges, I think I mentioned Howard Kleinbell was a Methodist minister, and he started this 2-week thing that Mike Robera said, George, let's go to this. It sounds pretty good. It's a 2-week seminar for clergy on counseling, how to counsel people and all that. And they introduce Virginia Satir, conjoint family therapy, and various types of things that were current then. And then later, when I went to Hollywood, the American Institute of Family Relations had a 2-week thing too for teachers, nurses, ministers, clergy. So myself and a Franciscan and maybe a OSA priest went to those. There were different presentations too that were helpful, but that kind of fed my counseling self, the self that wanted to really meet with people and help them in that capacity. So then I found out, do you remember Ken Burr?
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, Ken Burr was from my parish, St. Cecilia's. And so I called, he had gone to Rome and had a nervous breakdown over there, kind of a tragic. He was he was like one of the top students and, right there at the top of everything. He was doing a lot for the Vatican Council, escorting cardinals, and he had some kind of nervous breakdown and was gone when I got there. But when I went through my struggle, I said, Ken, where do you advise I go and kind of study? I want to pursue my interest in families. And he told me about, where I went, this California Family Studies Center. He said it was founded by a couple of USC professors that he knew, and he'd gone to USC. And so anyway, he had left the priesthood somewhere along the line as a result of his nervous breakdown. And I never did hear the whole story behind it, but and he had a brother, Gene Burr, right? Gene Burr, wonderful guy too. Just so that's how I started doing the counseling, even before I decided to go. And even then, I was called into the chancery, and they said, George, do you want to go into social work? We'll fund your study at USC to become a social worker. And at that time, I was already thinking of leaving, so I kind of declined the offer. Anyway, partly what did it is, my studies at the California Family Studies Center involved studying about something called the undifferentiated family ego mass, called UFEM. And I did an UFEM paper. I could send it, but the idea is that in a family network, there's a psychological, emotional gravity, that keeps you. And some people break out of it. They differentiate, and they do something that's shocks the parents or whatever, and they're disowned. That would be the extreme thing. So the son or daughter never has anything to do with the parents again, as opposed to breaking out and doing something different, but yet trying to remain in contact, with the parents and work it out and heal the breach. But I can remember getting these messages from the bishop saying, let's take abortion, for example. Give this sermon about abortion, and tell what a terrible sin. And I said, wait a minute, or I'd get this letter saying, the Archbishop would be saying, kind of a letter back to the Pope saying, yeah, using we, the undifferentiated family ego mass. And I said to myself, oh, wait a minute, I don't believe that. That's not the tone that I want to express to people. So I was differentiating myself, you know what I mean? I was breaking out of this UFEM, this undifferentiated family ecclesiastical feeling. Like when you talked about Fosselman, well, he didn't have that. He was in it. It's the same thing about Trump. He's got this UFEM, undifferentiated family emotional ego mass that sucks in all the Republicans, that don't get out of line, or they get axed like hawks. Hawks will come in. And so anyway, so the same thing. So I was studying all this. Murray Bowen was a Georgetown psychiatrist who had all this figured out. So he'd come out and give a workshop, and so I was differentiating myself, so to speak, through the studies that I was going through. And there was transactional analysis, parent, adult, child selves within each of us. There's a parent self, the adult self, and the little child self, and you differentiate. So all we were getting the cutting edge, and that's why Ken Burrid recommended it. He says, you'll get the cutting edge if you go to this school. So I was studying all these psychodrama, anger management, all kinds of stuff. So it was kind of a committee, George, to go back. There wasn't one spiritual director, but I did confer with different people, and this psychologist helped me figure out that I could be a spiritual person without being a priest. I could separate my identity as a spiritual person from my role in the priesthood. So then I had to kind of figure that out. And so, it was a very tough decision. Yeah, because all my life I wanted to be a priest, and I didn't, to kind of do the acts that makes Jesus present in today's world and so forth. So anyway, it was a big decision. Yeah, I did a little, do you know Malcolm Boyd? Are You Running With Me, Jesus? Do you remember that book?
Yes.
Well, he's an Episcopal priest, and he had a writing workshop when I was at All Saints Episcopal Church. I kind of submitted my name. I said, I'd like to join this writing workshop with Malcolm Boyd. So I did that, and I did a little paper about myself called The Fortune Cookie, which was kind of about my decision making. It could have been a better written piece, but I did write it, and if you want, I could email it to you, but that's kind of
I'd love to.
how I went through my decision. Yeah, it was tough, and I didn't do it in the best way. You know what I did? I wrote a letter, and I wish I had a copy of my letter too, but I wrote a letter to Cardinal Manning, and it said, Dear Cardinal Manning, blah, 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 paragraphs. And I said, please add my name to the following individuals. And maybe there were like 79, with William Dubé at the top and all the other people who had left. Please add my name to the following individuals. And that was it. And then I left the rectory. And
so you wanted to put an exclamation point, huh?
Yeah. I didn't even see him in person. I just kind of wrote him that letter. I felt so kind of foreign to I didn't feel the attachment to Manning at all. I felt he was a doom and gloom. Many people think of him as very holy. Well, he was very holy, but in a very otherworldly way, which I don't want to be. I was teaching when I was at Pomona. I taught at Pomona Catholic Girls High School. I taught junior and senior religion. And one of the books that had come out around that time in the 60s, talk about this, was Harvey Cox wrote a book called The Secular City.
Oh,
Here's this. Yeah, that was a very important book for me. He was a Southern Baptist who was talking about God and the secular city. So I was actually teaching some of the concepts in that to these girls who were juniors
In
and
the
seniors
Catholic
at Pomona
school.
Catholic. And I was creating the atmosphere that they could ask questions about their religion. They could be open in class. And that probably got me booted out of St. Joseph's in Pomona, because I was only there a year and a half, and then I went to another parish. And it's probably because I don't know what it was. The chancellor just says, "Oh, we think you'd be better off here." But I'm thinking that Monsignor English probably did not like my teaching about Harvey Cox and the secular city.
Somebody squealed on you.
Yeah, maybe some parents, or who knows, or somebody, but it's all conjecture.
Sure.
But that's where I was at the time. Here's this guy coming from Rome, teaching in the secular city by Harvey Cox. But I didn't see any problem with that at all. No problem. Yeah.
Well,
More
we've been
power
How
to you.
were you doing, Tom, in those years?
What was I doing?
How were you doing?
Yeah,
How
so
was
I
I
was in for 8 years total in 3 parishes. So just to
Yeah.
put
Mm.
that in there. Yeah.
Well, I my main struggle was with the liturgical backwardness. And I had really invested my whole self very much into what I would still call the first love of my life, and that was liturgy. And to find, things being misunderstood and officially going south, and at the same time, so much of the practice of those who wanted to be with it in the Vatican II sense going in a direction that was really, I would say, pastorally unsound, because they would tend to lose connection with the meaning of sacrament and sort of make it, well, whatever you feel like, let's feel nice and holy and joyful and blah, blah, blah. And, there was a time there, and I would say this was mostly in the 70s, when I was really having to struggle with that. And to be honest, at this point, I'm not prepared to go into any more detail on that, because I would probably occupy you for the next hour or two. And
we're now 2 hours in.
We're now 2 hours in.
Okay.
To be continued.
To be continued at some point in some way.
George Farrick,
and
thank you.
And I've got one or two little thoughts and whatnot that I'm going to email you also. And I'll finish up the recording of this if anybody wants to do any post-mortem analysis.
It's a vivisection. It's not post-mortem.
Yeah, I'd be glad to share with you some more things too. Most of my problems came from questioning that I came up with, doubt from dealing with people in the confessional and in counseling. When I was at Immaculate Heart Parish in Hollywood, I did some counseling with gay people, and there was even, I don't know if it was a man, even an early transgender type situation where somebody was seeing me who was thinking of doing that, and my counseling that person. So I was already introduced to that kind of situation, now that's more prominent. But also the birth control. I remember, do you ever remember somebody called the Hillside Strangler?
Yeah.
Or the Freeway Killer?
Yeah.
At that time, there's somebody in St. Ignatius Parish who came to me it was about birth control. I'm not sure if one of his children were killed in the murder or something, but the whole question was kind of like yours, John. Can this be my family, or do I have to go on and have more children? And so I think you have the right to make that decision. I was against the thing about, against birth control, because I had been aware in Rome that there was a committee that was counseling the Pope that there was a way of getting beyond the church's viewpoint, kind of evolving it. But it was voted down by the conservatives, even though the majority of this commission were for it.
That was a weakness of Paul the
No,
Sixth,
no,
I think.
no, George, what, if I remember correctly, it wasn't voted down by anybody. It was just vetoed by Pope Paul VI.
Yeah.
I think he was afraid of that controversy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but I'm sure there was some Curia people, yeah,
yeah.
right, yeah, the commission. Yeah, you know, that's
But the
correct. So,
majority of the commission was strongly in favor of change.
right, exactly.
That's
And
what I
Paul
read.
just
Yep.
blew it off.
Yeah, yeah. So I felt a lot of empathy for, call it the common person, you know, the lay person.
Mhm.
And I just felt, hey, I'm wearing a collar, I'm a police officer. If I can't represent the laws, I better take my collar off, you know, hang it up. Because I can't do that. So anyway, so that, but we can get more into that if you want to, but that's why I kind of have more progressive views on transgender issues and gays, you know, being married and
Mhm.
all that, because I met with them and, you know, deeply religious Catholic people who were gay and wanted to be Catholic and gay at the same time.
Mhm.
Of course, then there was Dignity at LA City College.
Yeah.
Pat
Mhm.
Thompson and Bill Kersey were in residence where I was, and they were very active in that and
Mhm.
going through all the shenanigans, you know, that went through. So anyway, yeah, to me,
It's been rich.
It has been a good day.
yeah,
So
yeah, okay,
we'll be in email touch as to whatever's needed to
yes,
prepare for next week. And are you inviting Pat Nicholson?
I'll contact Fred Lawrence and
Or
Joe
Fred Lawrence,
DeMassa.
sorry.
How's that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fred Lawrence.
Okey-doke.
Okay. Well, God
Great.
bless you all. And
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
What stories our ordained classmates have, huh? I mean, you know, look at Tom with his seething over the liturgy, and George, and then I'll bet none of this ever hit John Moretta, you know, I'll bet. I don't know, maybe.
yeah, who knows?
Um,
Yeah,
maybe.
But-
maybe, yeah, who
And Norm
knows?
Tupenchak, Scott definitely has his own story, which he
Yes,
wrote.
he does.
He wrote a book about it.
And he
yeah.
wrote about it. That's right.
He did? Oh.
So,
Well, you know what I'm learning is that everybody, you know, all of this Friday Five, and then other people like Bishop Barron and the priest, you know, the weightlifter priest, everybody's seeking a genuine, authentic expression of Catholicism or Christianity or religiosity, right? With the lights that each of us have come across.
mhm.
You know, the influences, the everything, and it's very admirable. You know, it's whether a person is in the institution or outside of the institution or in and out or whatever, coming back or going in. You know, I think it's admirable. Everybody wants a true expression of something, and everybody's trying to find it. It seems.
And so to be continued.
Yes, to be continued.
Amen.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
So I'm going to push the end button right now, and goodbye, everyone.
Thanks,
God
everybody.
bless.
Well,
Great.
Bye-bye.
Uh,